Is it okay now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Pillai, I don't know, this will be really useful, but I was very strong to share about my thoughts on this.
This will be useful because there was no topic on this, and I think this is one of the critical functions for a civil engineer.
Yeah, correct.
And although we had 30 webinars, we did not have a single webinar on this. So I think this is very much interesting because most of the students must know about this.
Yes, during my interaction in my service tenure, I find this is the major bottleneck, even quite a pretty senior level also. Sometimes fundamental things are slightly disoriented.
Exactly.
And it is not a very complex thing, but our legal jargon and this formal vocabularies make it so repulsive to general, youth.
Correct.
They feel, how complex it is, why, who will make interpretation out of these languages. So I just tried to make something very simple and so that fundamentally they will understand different aspects of procurement, tendering and just one bit of agreement and contract legality. Because without that will not be, the topic will not be complete. Otherwise, it's a very vast area.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think that would close the loop actually, because
yes.
One of the important aspects that many civil engineers are not aware, especially when you have a consultant, contractor, and the client. I think
correct.
There's a very good dynamics, that has to be.
Yes, and I'm very happy about this endeavor by Ramki Cement. They have initiated this kind of series during lockdown period to make best use of time.
Correct, sir.
Yeah.
In fact,
what made Ramco think on this?
What had happened was that we used to conduct this engineers meet and meeting for construction professionals.
Okay.
At various places.
I see.
But during this lockdown, we could not do that. So we thought that this is the next best option to connect with the construction professionals so that, various topics we engage them.
Yes.
Those were in fact, we had topics on blended cement by Dr. Pasla from IIT Bhubaneswar.
Okay.
And again, we had a topic on blended cement with 3 blending materials yesterday by Dr. Manu Sandhanam of IIT Madras.
I see. Okay.
So now today we have you from IIT Kharagpur.
No, I am not as learned as these faculty.
But this would give us a perspective from the practical.
Yeah, practical approach. This is what I told Mr.
Anirban also.
Yeah, Anirban also.
In fact, we had structural consultants from Bangalore also who spoke. There was panel discussion on ready-mix concrete, on sustainability in concrete.
Very good. Okay.
So we had 3 panel discussions. Then we had a topic on smart city by Dr. Mona Shah from Delhi.
Oh, that was important. I would have loved to attend it, but sometime I don't find time. You have been sharing some of the topics, but.
And then we had a topic on risk management by Dr. Premanand Shonai of Mangalore.
Okay.
He's also from Association of Consulting Civil Engineers India from Mangalore. So he dwelled upon the risk management and all that.
Okay.
And we had a topic on non-destructive testing in concrete structures.
Yeah. I think that is about a day or two before, I guess.
Correct. From Osmania University.
Yes. I have been associated with different parts of civil engineering. I'm basically a civil engineer.
Okay.
Like from designing, planning, even when I was in Uttarakhand, it's infrastructure development. So administration ke saath mein licensing, and then in DMRC I was handling land sale also, land acquisition.
Right.
And design also plus construction, so as that goes without saying.
Okay.
So, and being worked in different organizations mean different ages of the organization. Some are too nascent, some are developing, and some are too formalized already.
Yeah.
So I could foresee the merits and demerits of different structure and ages of the organization.
Okay.
So this is something very important I felt. This was uniformly missing in most of the tenures.
Correct. So because even there are many queries, like as basic as how long should we store cement? Is there any codal provision with respect to storage of cement?
Yes.
Those questions. How do we store aggregates? How do we store sand? The planning aspect is missing actually. And planning aspect means procurement plays a very vital role in that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Without that, you cannot do anything at site if you don't plan for.
Correct. And if we make our tender document or bidding document properly, everything is inherent in the tender document. It's supposed to be inherent.
Yeah.
Even it might be referring to thousands of reference documents outside. I mean, not physically in the tender document, but references must be there. So this is what we call the specifications and conditions. So it has to be precise. The more precise, more appropriate it is. That
as simple as how to check the slump of concrete.
Yes.
Sometimes the slump value can be a matter of argument, even though the concrete would be good quality. If suppose 80 to 100 mm can be a point of argument if it is not very clear sometimes.
Oh, I see. Okay. But I think slump is defined for different types of uses of concrete. Very well defined in these codes.
Correct. But as you rightly said, if it is not stated in the tender document in quality specifications, if things are not brought out clearly, it can create a kind of confusion. When
Correct.
stakeholders are there.
Yeah. At least reference to applicable standards must have been included.
Exactly. And especially those who are not related to civil engineering, because there are so many people who are taking decisions who are not a civil engineer.
Correct.
There it, I think, plays a very vital role.
Yes. And it is not going to be very long. I'm sorry, but
okay.
It was important. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, there will be a lot of question answer session will be there.
No problem.
Yeah. I think.
Do you have any limiting condition for number of participants?
No, we have 1,000 on this platform.
Good. Okay.
And others can also see via Facebook Live on Ramco Cement's page also.
Okay.
Because some of them would not want to, kind of log into the platform.
Okay.
In fact, we had covered everything from concrete, cement to geotechnical, but this one I am sure that we will close the loop procurement process. In fact, we never thought about it. So when you gave this idea, we were very happy about it.
Oh, I'm honored. Thank you. Okay.
So we'll start off with the talk today. Let me invite all the participants, all the construction professionals who have logged in. A very warm good evening to all of you. Good evening to the speaker of the day, Engineer Vivek Srivastava, who have joined us. In spite of the problems in West Bengal, the cyclone that has hit yesterday night, he has been able to join. Thank you, sir, for taking time off your busy schedule to be here. Let me give a brief introduction of the speaker of today. He is an UPSC Engineering Services recruit of 1988 batch with 31 plus years wide and varied experience in infrastructure works. Also attended successfully a course by United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific on public-private partnership. He has worked in different work environment of various organization systems. He is working as chief engineer at Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur, and we are honored to have you here, sir. And he is going to share with us a very critical aspect of construction, which we have missed till now. So this 31st webinar would be covering the most significant part of it, the procurement and contracts management by Engineer Vivek Srivastava. So once again, I welcome you, sir. The share content is enabled and you can start off with your presentation. Thank you so much, sir.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Pillai, for giving me this opportunity to interact with the larger fraternity of engineers. This was the area which I felt I came across in different departments and different teams, that this is something is really what our young engineers miss when they are inducted into the professional service. And it is not very in depth taught, I would say, in their academic syllabus. This is something every engineer have to come across in their professional life, be it civil engineer or mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, mining engineer, or anyone. So, and this is not very complex area, but our legal jargon and complex languages of the documents or vocabulary or complex sentences framing in the document, they make this document little repulsive for the young engineers especially. So they just keep on doing the job monotonously rather than really understanding the essence of the process. This is the procurement definition. How it is different from just general buying or with diligent buying. So when it is diligent buying or careful buying, it is procurement. I'll start with the simple example from our daily routine life. Suppose we are buying items for our meals. So meal will contain different items which belong to different domains. Like some items, grocery, dairy, vegetable, fruit. And if we make equivalence in our professional life, suppose grocery pertain to civil section or dairy pertain to electrical section, vegetable may be mechanical or RAC, refrigeration section, fruit may be network and telephone system. So for a project to happen, entire different units, different sections have to work in coordination and synchronization. And every procurement process will be specialized depending on the specialized discipline they will be procured for. So once we decide the scope of this work, further distribution or further splitting of requirement is converted into bill of quantities. And first of all, like requirement, what is requirement is what is missing in the kitchen, what is needed for the meal and what is available. So what is needed minus what is available is the requirement, and further application of that requirement is the bill of quantities, where we specify particular item and the quantity. Like here you can see the potato, onion, beans, and tomato. I'll continue with the same example so that it remains very simple. Now, once we are done with bill of quantities, we proceed for procurement. Procurements, we tend to buy the things from the market. Now, what is market? Market, it's a place where we have buyers and sellers both without any constraint. I mean, technically, with free competition, anyone can sell in the market, anyone can buy in the market. There is no restriction. Ideally, a market condition is supposed to be like this. Now, I explain vendors with different capabilities of service or product to meet the buyer's requirement, and buyers are there with certain requirements and constraints. There's a difference, you see. Vendors have a range of capabilities of service, whereas each buyer has a certain requirement or constraint. So what are the capabilities? Capabilities of the vendors are rates. I mean, there's a range of capabilities, rates, quality, there is a range of quality, there is a range of rates, there is a range of ease. I mean, some may be close to the parking area and some may be away from the parking area. Some may be difficult to reach, some may be difficult to interact. And there is a range of goodwill to whom some may be knowing, some may be popular in the market, like this fellow gives a good quality of vegetable always, or maybe someone has a good rapport with you. So these are the different characteristics in the market of the vendors, and buyer has certain requirements and constraints. These requirements and constraints are quality. Buyer has a certain fixed mindset about his quality, what he wants to buy. When he started from the home, he has a fixed assessment of the quantity he wants to buy the things from the market. He has certain time frame, within half an hour he has to be back, and then he has a certain prefix budget. So these things are the predetermined sets, and the market has a range of these responses to these criteria. Out of these determinants, the first two, quality and quantity, are the requirements, and time and budget are constraints for the buyer. Now, the buyer has two options, Suppose he has two options. One has, he buys different items from the different vendors, which usually happens. And another option is he buy all the items from a single vendor. There is a difference in the two situations. In the first situation is generally what we do when we are buying vegetables from the market. This is applicable in our professional life generally to the items of procurement only, where there is no service element integrated in the procurement process. Just buying, and there are discrete natured items. We can simply place like stationery item or some tools and plants we can buy from different vendors. But suppose if you buy all the items from single vendor, that brings into the picture the longer term association. I will explain one by one. Accountability, possibility for addition of activities, cutting, packaging, delivery. Like if you are buying from single vendor, definitely that means you have certain long-term association with them, some reason. That is what has tempted you to go to that item, that particular vendor. that vendor has better accountability, better goodwill, or you have some understanding between you and him that if you don't buy from him, next time he may be charging you more, or if he doesn't give you at the good rates, you may lose the business with him in the next time. So both have some certain understanding between you and him or her. And there is also possibility of addition of activities. Suppose you're buying from single vendor, definitely he may be offering you to add to the cutting, packaging, delivery without any charges. So you are in a subtle way, have developed a risk allocation between you and the vendor. And this is called agreement, which makes you to go to the single vendor rather than buying individual items from individual vendors. So I emphasize for the second option because this is the normal objective of our procurement process. Now, there is a difference in private procurement and public procurement. Like when we buy vegetables from the market, it is like private procurement because I am master of my own money. I am buying my own vegetables. But when it is a public procurement, like it's something like if you assign the job of buying vegetables to your servant. Now, every employee is servant of some organization, like government servant are also called government servants. So we represent somebody who is the owner. Public sector, how it is different, let me explain you. See, the environment or the structure of public and private sector is little different. We have limited supplier, limited set of shareholders, limited set of customers, a limited set of employees in private sector. But public sector has a very vast and complex structure, where each domain is common to an interfering or mixing with other domains also. So we have employees, we have suppliers, we have customers, we have taxpayers, plus also we have certain other things like we have authorities, environmental authorities, government distribution, enforcement authorities. So it has a very complex and large structure in which we are dealing with public money. And public money means it is our own money also in a sense. So we have to be accountable to whatever we spend. We are responsible for spending. Like explain, these elements are important in public sector procurement. Public audit is there. There is right to information. We are answerable to public. There vigilance. There have to be integrity in the process. So this is how public procurement process is different from private procurement. And because in public procurement process, I'm dispensable, or buyer is the person who is representing is dispensable. Anyone can replace him. So to make the things consistent and uniform, we have firm procedures and rules so that it is almost on automated mode. Whosoever comes to buy the things, he has to follow certain rules and procedures. And it can be done by any servant, any person. So this is the main difference in private procurement and public procurement. Now in public procurement, I will list out 6 points which are very important. Number 1 is transparency. But transparency should not be mishandled in a way that it compromises the confidentiality aspect of the procurement process. So we have to be very judicious to ensuring both the things, transparency and confidentiality of the public procurement process. Second is fairness. The procurement process should be fair to all the bidders, all the prospective vendors. It should not be partial to one or two of them. Third element is economy or frugality. This is nothing but the obtaining the best price at minimum cost. This is common to public procurement also and the private procurement also. Even our individual buying also we ensure this. Acceptable performance. By this I mean to say it has to be very firm and clear in our document, in our process. What do we want and in what time do we want this to happen, to be delivered? And third is work. By work means the quantum of work or service, what is to be done, quantum, requirement, or location. So these 6 elements are very important in public procurement process to be specified and to be ensured. Sorry, 6, no, this budget, and budget is the estimate. I'm sorry. The 6th was missed out. The budget is the 6th point where amount has to be clearly mentioned in our bidding document. We cannot change this amount after the bids are received. So it has to be firmed up, like budget and work acceptable performance. It has to be firmed up before bids are received. Of these 6 points, the first 3 are to be ensured in the process. And the last 3, acceptable performance, work, budget, it has to be specified clearly in the document. Together, the 6 points make the public successful or effective or ideal procurement, public procurement process. And this is done through a document called tender document by a process called tendering and bidding. Now, aspects of a tender are from department side, very vocal or clear about the requirements. So making a tender document is the very important aspect. We have to be very specific about our requirements. Another aspect of tendering is to find out the capability of the prospective bidder, how capable is the vendor. Third is how reliable is the proposal by vendor. So this mechanism is also has to be ensured in the tender document. How reliable is the proposal? How will you evaluate? I mean to say, how beneficial is the proposal? So what are the considerations for the bidder and for the department, both the sides? Like what we are going to achieve as a bidder and as the initiator of the document. And 5th one is important from vendor's viewpoint. Tender document should speak about entity who is initiating the tender. It should be attractive enough to attract or tempt bidders to come for the bid. Ease of business and fund assurance are the 2 things normally any bidder seeks to see in a tender document. Usually with public sector, fund assurance is not an issue, but ease of business may vary from department to department or location to location, region to region. Or even with private sector also, ease of business and fund assurance, both the things are very important. But because tender document is usually initiated by the entity, the organization, by the department, so I have highlighted the first 4 points in bold color. The 5th one is important from the bidder's perspective. Now, what are the tender types? Tender types based on visibility of bids are 3 usually: direct award, limited tender, and public or open tender. Direct award are very rarely used in public sector. Usually it's a no and touch me not kind of system unless it is regulated or requisitioned through a very strict procedure, like if there is a highly specialized item with intellectual property limitations, only the single vendor is there in the entire world, in the entire market. So it has to be approved by the competent authority, rather head of the organization, before going for this kind of bidding. Because these are questionable, this becomes a lot of controversy also. So these are very rarely used, direct award. Limited tender are the system. In this system, we have to save time of the tendering process or the evaluation process in the tendering. We usually have a impaneled set of vendors kind of thing, where we have a set of bidders or prospective vendors selected for different categories already, which is usually renewed every 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years, depending on the department's policy. So this saves time on evaluation. So we usually issue the tender documents, select to the people from the impaneled vendors, and they simply give us the price bid against this tender document. So evaluation process time is saved in this type of tendering. Public tender is usually the most common and most desired way of tendering in public sector. This can be national or global. When it is circulated within the national territories, it is called national, and if it is going across the global, across the boundaries, then it is called global. Based on modalities of payables tender types, I would like to explain here because tender types are different on the basis of the criteria. We cannot simply say how many types of tender. If someone asks how many tender types, then we should immediately seek to clarify on what basis you want this. You want to know the clarification in any interview or in any question answer sessions. This based on modalities of payables are item rate, percentage rate, lump sum, EPC, turnkey, and PPP. I will explain very briefly with the same example which I continued in the last slides. Like item rate, when we go to the market with our certain with firm quantities against each item, like potato, I want 2 kg, onion 1 kg, beans half kg, tomato 1 kg, and the vendor is supposed to fill up the rate and quantity. The portion which vendor will be filling is, I have made it in a different color, the orangish or reddish color, and the document which is already specifying the data, which is shown in blue color. So the vendor goes to the market with the predefined quantities, and the vendor or market will be filling up, bidder from the market will be filling the rate against each item. So this is called item rate. Advantage of this item rate tender is that during execution, variations are very effectively controlled. And the advantage of this effective control in item rate tender is that during execution, suppose some items are varied or deviated. So at the end of the day, when we close the contract, it does not happen that due to this variation, the situation, the relative position of the bidders does not change. I mean to say, the person who was L1 at the time of bidding, he does not become L2 at the end of the contract closing. So if we go for item rate tender, this is very easy to control. And even some items are like abnormally low rated or abnormally high rated as per the market trend. They are also effectively monitored in this kind of item rate tendering or tender management. The second one is percentage rate. In percentage rate, what happens? The buyer has defined the quantities and rates also. And bidder has to simply quote the percentage over the overall rates which bidder has specified in the tender document. So advantage of this kind of tendering is that during execution, measurement and processing of bills becomes very easy, and the risk of any change in position of the bidder at the end of the contract when the contract closes is also very it's not at all it's ruled out rather. The only risk in this kind of percentage tender is that individual items are not very effectively controlled. Suppose some items are very high rated and more profitable to the vendor, and some items are not much profitable. So there may be a tendency for him to execute more profitable items, though the position of L1 and L2 will not change. So the most preferred way of item rate is the item rate tender. I will explain further why do we resort to these kind of tendering when that is the best one. The third one is lump sum contract. In this contract, we go to the vendor like this kind of requirement: 2 kg potato, 1 kg onion, half kg beans, and 1 kg tomato. It could be the total amount. Like many times we do it in the market also. Give me this, give me the total amount when we are short of time or something in the market. So this is called lump sum. These kind of contracts are very common in a department. Some departments, like if I remember, MES does very generally these kind of contract. They have certain fixed. I mean, department has a very set type of buildings, type specifications. Everything is freezed. So there is not much scope for contractors to play around during execution. So they go for these kind of, and tender document encloses all the drawings, specification to the finest details, and the vendor quotes against the total job as a lump sum amount, and the payments are made during stages wise, like a foundation or during this slab, this slab level, you'll be paid this. Now, third type of procurement is EPC, in which like buyer go to the market. I want to have a meal of made of potato, onion, beans, and tomato. I don't mind whatever proportion you want to use this, but my family size is 4. You give me a dish or you give me a meal for this and charge me. Now this is EPC. Now the vendor will design the dish. Vendor will select the relative proportion of the different components, and he will quote for the final item which is going to serve. This is called engineering, procurement, construction. This definitely saves cost of procurement. I mean, ultimate product or service. But again, we have to be very, very careful. What are the boundary conditions? Like if you have specified, you can use any one of these, but you have to be clear, minimum potato you want this, or maximum beans you want this. So this, we have boundary limiting conditions have to be very precise in EPC conditions, EPC tendering. Turnkey jobs are like this. Suppose I don't even specify potato, onion, or beans also. Just I want vegetables for a dinner of family of 4. Now he will come up with certain amount. This can still further, but then here we have to be very clear about our functional requirement, not the component wise. We are looking for a vegetable, but then we have to specify like taste, how much salt, and what should be nutrition value, what should be the cooking time, and how well cooked it be, how raw it should be. So on those kind of aspects, it has to be very clear. So depending on what requirements and up to what level of requirements we have frozen from our end, that will lead you to decide on the type of tendering. The final type of tendering is PPP, which we call public-private partnership, also called build, operate, transfer, build, operate, build, own and operate, build, own, operate and transfer kind of thing. So in this, what happens, the same example, if you go, suppose I have a piece of land in my house. I call the vendor, you grow vegetables here. I don't mind selling some of the vegetables to outside. I don't mind, but you give me vegetables for me, for a family of 4 for 30 years. You tell me how much money you will take. Definitely it will be the cheapest. Rather, he can give some money to me also for giving this vegetable to me now, because he will be making use of this land for his own revenue generation also. Here it can be otherwise also, rather than paying for each item, like our toll contracts are like this. So rather than making it per meal of the charges, we can also ask for one upfront payment from him for 30 years before starting the contract. Suppose before I give my piece of land to him for vegetable, so I may ask him to give me a certain upfront money, like 1 lakh rupees for 30 years. And then in addition to 1 lakh rupees, you continue to give me the vegetables also. In PPP mode, we have to be very careful about legal binding aspects and control, so that vendor does not misuse the permissions or concession. We call it actually, these are called concession agreement in PPP mode, and the vendor is called concessionaire. So concessionaire is not able to misuse the concession given to him for the PPP contracts. Now, on the basis of evaluation and selection process, tender types are 3 types generally, which is single bid, which generally we resort to limited tender types. So we don't need to go for any technical bid or price bid separately. We simply ask for the price bid from the limited tender. 2-bid packet system is where we first we ask the bidders to give their bid in technical and price bid 2 packets, and technical bids are first open and price bid are open later. It is a matter of principle I would like to share with my audience here. We should make a rule in our tender processing after opening of price bid. Once we know the prices of the bidder, we should not resort to any interaction with the bidder until your bid is finalized by the department. So that is why 2-bid system was thought to be required to be initiated. That gives us that safety feature, because price remains closed. So there is no any chance of malpractices because price bid is closed. So we can interact as many times, formally, informally, and we can make, but formally we have to be fair with each of them on record. And also, we have to be ensuring that all the bidders are at par as far as requirements, communication, and conditions communication to them are concerned. we should not be partial with any one of them unless price during this technical bid evaluation when they are interacting before opening of price bid. There could be 2, 3 or more stages also. Suppose many times like we go for a presentation round or maybe work inspection before the prospective before opening the price bid. Many organizations wants to see the works, actual works of the bidders, to have the first-hand information and assessment of their works, whether whatever they submitted in the document is really exist on the ground, or do they really deliver to our expectation, or do their documents really office does really exist on it. There are so many things. Many times documents are also faked. So we may include bidders' work inspection or office inspection or factory inspection before opening up a price bid to make it more reasonable or more accurate assessment of the capability of the bidder. And all these type of bidders, single, 2-bid or 2-bid, inherent principles of the sequence of the processing procurement process are ensured, which is expression of interest, which is called request for information, also called request of information. The next stage is the request for proposal, and the third final stage is request for quotation. So in 2-bid system, RFP is sort of, you can say in the technical bid, and RFQ is the price bid. In the single bid packet, we directly are going for RFQ because EOI and RFP is ensured in the empanelment process. And in the 3-bid or in work inspection process, this EOI and RFP, they are covering these 3 stages before the RFQ, that is price bid stage. I hope I am not too heavy or complex. Mr. Pillai, can you clarify? Is it okay till now?
It's okay. It's perfectly very nicely, because the analogy that you are taking is making it much more simpler.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
It's very interesting.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, let me come to the tender components here. We will not disagree that many tender documents in all the departments are, why they are complex, because we are saying same thing at multiple locations in the document. We are saying contradictory things about the same issue at multiple locations of the document. We are repeating our information in different sections. So if we organize our information in tender components like the way I'm going to explain, it will be very easy, very efficient also, and very effective. Let me explain it here like this. The first component of tender, and first and foremost, which is the interface with the public, and the first is a notification. The notification, the part should have the notice, that obviously the notice of the document. It can include the press note, web notice, or whatever. It should have name of work. Location is very important. Mode and type of tender should be specified, whether single bid, 2-bid, or 3-bid, or whatever. Estimated amount has to be clearly mentioned in this part. Time limit, earnest money, date of pre-bid meet, date of receipt, contact info of the issuing entity. Many times what happens, this information is again repeated inside the tender in different sections. So I would suggest all the audience to structure their tender document in such a way that information is not repeated, rather references should be made. Nowadays we have very smart applications, word application or word processing applications. No need to copy and paste, because this leads to errors and mistakes, and this can be very serious during contract management process, and that can lead to arbitration many times. Department may also lose, and department and contractor may also lose, and they may lead to, then they will be compelled to go to dispute and arbitration and court cases. So I would earnestly appeal rather all the audience to make their tender document in such a way, in such a structured way, that information is generally avoided to be repeated, rather give the references. Second component of tender is the rules. These rules are about the tendering process. Like what is for a particular tender, like what is the qualifying criteria, what is the shortlisting evaluation criteria and selection process, and what are the interpretation of statutory provisions like taxation, duties, uske liye department ka kya stand hai, what is the stand of department on those issues. because these are related to certain cross section of the time, not as a universal thing. So during this time, during March or during this year, what are the interpretation of the department on this? This is dependent on the government policy also at that time. What is the bid validity? Up to what time bid will remain valid so that contractor can be enforced to honor this? Security and performance guarantee deposits and refund rules. So these are general rules. I will not say conditions here. There's a difference in rules and conditions. So these are the rules. It is like information to tenderer section. So this, now again, whatever we are mentioning here, it should not be repeated in other sections to minimize the chances of errors and mistakes. The third one is requirement. This is the set of requirements about our work. So this should specify what do we want from the vendor and what is the requirements, what is the time limit. Time limit, I do not mean to say what I mentioned here. The time limit means time stages. I mean the progress stages, the desired stages of work. Applicable standards, what are the applicable standards? Specifications, if there are different special specifications for certain things, we have to specify here. Bill of quantities is part of this. Drawings, photographs, and site layout. So if we see our tender is complete more or less from here up to here. But a very important thing we are missing here, which is generally common to all type of tenders in your organization, whether it is civil tender, whether it is electrical tender, a refrigeration tender, which is called general conditions. So this is a standard format. Usually no need to add this volume in the tender document. You can make a permanent copy on your website as a reference link, a reference document, and give a reference about general conditions of contract. Again, by this way, chances of minimize, these are very important set of conditions. So we can make these conditions, condition in separate component, separate heading of the tender document. These conditions will also may be specific to this particular work. So those are called special conditions. These are like site assessment before quote, they are general condition. Progress milestones, they may be special condition, general conditions also, depending on the specific work. Technical staff details, again, this will be special condition. Forfeiture of EMD, PG, and SG, this is the general conditions. Penalty for delay will be general conditions or may be special for a specific work. Action against deficiency may be specific to this work or may be a general condition. Extra item variation and deviation of these items, how do we handle these items? These are general conditions. Payment terms in general, I mean, what is the time for scrutiny? How will the vendor submit the bill? What is required to be submitted along with the bill? And and special conditions. So these four if we keep in our mind any tender document to be structured in very distinct and separate and complete components like this, there will be very minimum chances of any mistakes or complications or errors in the tender document. Now, we have done the tendering. Now, what is the agreement? Agreement, because we are doing all this to enter into an agreement with the vendor so that vegetable vendor can give me the vegetables as per our requirement. So agreement is nothing. It is consent for an offer, consent by some person to the offer made by some other person. Agreement, for agreement to happen, you have to have at least two people. No single person can make an agreement. A single person can speak, can walk, can run, can reach Mount Everest, but single person cannot make an agreement. So for agreement to have happened, we should have at least two people. There has to be an offer for an agreement to happen, and there should be a consent. These two things are inevitable, and once the offer is accepted, this becomes an agreement. How our law defines an agreement, our Indian Contract Act is very well defined document or drafted document. It is such an old contract document of 1872. Even now it has not been amended. I mean, so maybe some amendment, but it has not been reframed or redrafted. Such is the beauty of this Contract Act. So as per this Contract Act, I will just simply state important 6 or 7 lines of this. Like I explained, when one person signifies to another his willingness to do or to abstain from doing something, it is not only to do. Offer can be made not to do something with a view to obtain the consent of it, so that I seek willingness of other person. Then in this state is called the person is making a proposal to other person. And when the person to whom proposal is made signifies his assent, when he gives his accord his consent, when he accepts, it is called acceptance of the proposal. The proposal is said to be accepted. And the moment proposal becomes accepted, the proposal becomes a promise. This is a very significant and very important point everybody should know. The moment it is accepted, it becomes a promise. And any person making the proposal is called promiser, and the person accepting is called promisee. And what are the benefits for the two in that proposal? Those benefits are called considerations. Every promise and every set of promises forming the consideration for each other is an agreement. An agreement not enforceable by law is said to be void. That's obviously clear. An agreement, there is a difference in agreement and contract, is that the agreement which is not enforceable by law is not a contract. Only agreement which can be enforced by law is contract. So contract is a subset of superset called agreement. And during the concurrency of the contracts, suppose certain policy decisions change, or government administration stipulations change that make some of the activities not legal, and then that also makes the agreement void. So these are the legal stipulations in the Contract Act. This animation is just to highlight the two important points. The only thing is the only agreement which is enforceable by law is a contract. Now, contract legality. All contracts are agreement, I explained, and all agreements are not contracts. Any contract, whether written, unwritten, signed, unsigned, legal contract. Let me emphasize here that for a contract, it is not necessary to have a written contract. Suppose I request Mr. Pillai to come to Kharagpur and let's have a dinner at our Kharagpur campus. And he accepts this. So this becomes a agreement between me and Mr. Pillai. It's a very much legal agreement. I need not write it or get it signed. For in view of the legal opinion, any offer and acceptance becomes a agreement, not a contract. The contract is, suppose I offer something which is not illegal, or I offer something to a person, or he gives his consent out of his suppose he is not legally attained the age of adulthood, or maybe he is physically or mentally not sane, and he has given his consent. Those are certain conditions again under which this agreement is not supposed to be called a contract. And written and signed contract is just an evidence. Why do we make so many written documents if it is not necessary to have a written document for agreement to have happened, even by legal, by law also? The only reason for having written document is that it is evidence in proof of court of law, for proof in court of law when required. It helps enforceability in case other party breaches it and refuses to recognize. So why do we write voluminous documents? Only because the mistrust continues. So that is the only reason. So that we remain fair at any stage. And another thing is, because it is not a small time frame agreements that may run into years or many years, many months. So the people handling the formal agreements or formal contracts between two organizations, people keep on changing. So that is also a requirement. Why should we have a written contract? This is again the same depiction of which I explained. Not meeting requirements like capacity, free consent, lawful consideration. I cannot ask anyone to damage the road or kill a person, and that does not become a contract, even if may be called an agreement, but it's not a contract. So contracts are agreements which are enforceable by law. Now, I have talked so much on tender process aspects and legality of the contract. So what is the tender? how do you define a tender in all this complex discussion we have held so far? Is it a consideration? Is it a consent? Is it a promise? Is it a proposal, or is it an offer? Because I cannot interact with the audience like the physical audience. So let me proceed on this. See, tender document changes its form depending on the stages of the tendering process. Let me explain here. When it is issued by the department, it is just an invitation and information. It is not even a proposal. Be very careful. It is not a proposal of the department. It is an invitation and information to the word or to the prospective domain of the bidders. Now, when tender is submitted, it becomes a proposal. And let proposal or offer. When we go back, if you go back to the legal definition, proposal or offer is the same thing. So when it is submitted by the bidder, then it becomes a proposal or offer of the bidder. And once letter of acceptance is issued, letter of acceptance is the consent of the department. And once accepted, the tender document becomes promise. So first it was proposal and offer. The same document becomes promise once LOA is issued to the selected bidder. And the bidder becomes the contractor, and the contractor becomes promiser of the work with rules and conditions, of course, whatever is specified in the tender document. Department becomes the promisee. The performance becomes promiser's consideration for the promisee, and the payment becomes the promisee's considerations for the promiser. So this is all I wanted to share or discuss with the audience today, Mr. Pillai. I would like to end my presentation today here, and I invite audience to come with any questions on this, whatever I have spoken so far.
All right. So I think, sir, that was a very good presentation. You're able to hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
That was a very good presentation. In fact, you made it so simple that I think now the curiosity would have been generated, for all the engineers to know more about this. In fact, within our team itself, we have a team of civil engineers.
Okay.
There were some who were, quite skeptical as to how this would play a role in our field actually.
Yes,
it's very important that, all the civil engineers must understand at least the basic meaning of all the words that you have mentioned. Because when you go and meet a customer, or when a civil engineer executes a construction work, he must understand this. So that, always the endeavor must be to complete the work with minimum possible arbitration, or let us say misunderstanding. That is very important, because at the end of the day, you fulfill the project, you complete the project. And what is important is that, the way you explained it was so interesting that, the dry subject become alive. That's what I can say.
Thank you.
One of the questions that has been raised, sir, what is the main difference between agreement and contract?
Yeah, agreement. I think I explained in my whatever agreement is not enforceable by law is contract. I mean, offer has to be legal, or consideration has to be legal, or the promiser or promisee, they should be in their senses and their free will. The agreement, the offer and consent should be under free will. So these are the 4 or 5. There are certain conditions like this, or simply whatever is not recognizable by law of the land is not a contract. It can be an agreement.
Another question which has come to me through the other social media is that sometimes projects take a lot of time to complete and hand over. Has it something to do with the way tender or contracts are being framed? Does it have any role?
Definitely, it has. It definitely has a role. That is why these conditions and the general conditions, we should be able to foresee what are the likely constraint during execution. See, it should not be one way tender document. Like, we should not, as a department, we should not impose all the conditions which are really like bringing the moon from the sky from the vendor. Many vendors, they tend to get the job, grab the agreement for the sake of business interest, even if it is not legally or contractually possible as per the terms given. So, and that leads to problem at the time of execution. So it has to be fair and balanced. And that is why in tendering process, a very important stage, because that is in the next type of session, if we elaborate on that tendering process, there is a very important event called pre-bid meeting. So every bidder has to be very, very careful and very sincere in attending pre-bid meetings to assess the site requirements, to assess the work requirement before attending the bid. I find a lot of, casualness and carelessness or very casual approach by the bidders also when they submit the bid. They simply see the estimated cost. They roughly work out kitna trend chal raha hai market mein. I'm sorry to use some Hindi words. It helps a little more expressive. So, jo trend chal raha hai, I will simply fill up plus or minus on the code. Department might have done a mistake in estimated cost, but that does not absolve the bidder from his responsibility or accountability, because it is going to become a promise from him as per legal scenario. So bidder has to be very, very careful and sincere in identifying the site conditions, the project duration, and the measurability of the work, payment terms, whether it is feasible or not. I can say the more responsible bidder fraternity become, the overall industry will be more effective. And we have to be in the times which is going to come now. We have the way the business environment is taking shape now. They're taking changes in the business environment. The changes are taking place. So bidder fraternity also has to be very, very responsible and careful. They should not simply aim for grabbing a work just for the sake of it.
Another query which has come: can contract has a condition to save the employee rights which is involved in the project execution of our office? I do not know what he meant by that. Employee rights can it be?
Employee, the term employee has nothing to do in the contract between organization and the vendor.
Normally it is called concessionaire agreement for big BOT projects. Does it mean it has no legality?
It has very much a legality, only by nature of that contract document of public-private partnerships, where we have some different arrangement, like I explained in our example. So these are by name, this is called concession, because the organization, or generally it is what is actually concession is the public is represented by the government and it is represented by the vendor. So public is offering some concession to the vendor against some services. Like I'm giving the concession, the government is giving concession to use the land. To use the land for the airport. You develop the airport and you charge the airport fees. So I'm offering them the concession, and they will in turn, they will give some revenue. So this is why it is called concession.
Another question which has been asked is that does contract tenders, does it also cover procurement of construction materials?
Of course, yes.
Because that is one of the points that has been made by one of the attendees.
Yes.
Appreciate if you could brief on guaranteed maximum price of contract. How does it work? I don't know. Maximum price of contract, is it?
What does it mean by maximum price of it? I already specified our budget and the quantum
estimate
to be specified. Yeah, it has to be very the prerequisite, important prerequisite.
That's it, sir. I think most of the comments has been taken care of. It was very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
In fact, you made it so nice without rushing through the slides. You had a very good analogy, and you took one simple example for easy understanding. When we look at from item wise to
if it has really served the purpose, I am very happy, really.
Otherwise, normally what would happen is that we go to the definition part of it. Item wise means this one, BOT, without appreciating the nuances in that. But you have brought out the nuances by giving a very good illustration, by giving a very good example. Which made it, what do you call it? In Hindi, we say that Jaan la diya aapne. No, together that way. So it was very good. Thank you so much for that presentation. So thank you for sparing your time, sir. As you rightly said, nothing can replace face-to-face interaction. But now time has come where we have to live with this virtual presentation. Without seeing many of the audiences, we need to make our presentation. That has become the norm nowadays. And of course, one advantage is that it starts on time, it finishes on time. That is the biggest
Yes.
advantage that we have through virtual presentation. So all of us respect each other's time. So that is very important. And thank you for your time. In spite of what has happened yesterday nights, you were able to make it. You know.
Yes.
And in
Thank
this
you, sir.
pandemic, in this pandemic session also, we are already grappling with so many problems, and I think some time to deviate our attention towards something which can be productive is what is required in the days to come. So that is where we are trying to bring out this so that many of them log in and try to see what is important for them. So thank you
Yes.
so much for having joined us. And tomorrow we are having one more webinar at the same time, 4 p.m. On precast construction by Dr. Kodandaraman of Pondicherry University. And day after tomorrow we have on post-tensioning works. So like this, we are bringing different aspects and different speakers come, as you rightly said. Academicians may go from their research point of view. Practitioners will bring the practical aspects, and I am sure that a combination of both theoretical and practical is what is required, because you cannot sacrifice theory and at the same time you need to understand what are the practical aspects.
Very
So
true.
that
Very
is the
true.
combination that we are trying to bring in. In that aspect, you have brought one perspective. Thank you so much, sir, for having joined us. So we take leave of you and thank you so much. Thank you.
I thank you. Thank you also. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you all the attendees for having spared their time, and thanks for the IT team for having been with us and ensuring that everything went on well. Thank you so much and all the best. Best wishes to all of you.